on your side. I have the two of us. Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Murphy Jr. This is Understandably Live, which is the streaming and interview portion of understandably.com. So if you've never heard of any of this, you should go to understandably.com, very good, and sign up and you'll get more of this. I am here today with Liz Steblay. I'm sorry, I didn't even ask how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, got it right.
Liz Steblay, who founded the Professional Independent Consultants of America. I should mention they've been a sponsor of ours. I should mention that up front, but I have you on here today because I think it's an interesting organization and your background, and I think our audience of the people who've been joining us here today and also just on the site in general would find it interesting. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Wow, my pleasure. And thank you for the invitation.
Yes. Can you, let's just start by, introduce yourself and let us know your background and how you came to start this organization.
Sure. And let's try to see if I can do it in the fast, short version. So I've been in consulting pretty much my whole postgraduate career, starting in the mid-90s, so back in the last century. I've worked as an internal OD consultant for Fortune 500 companies. I've worked as a consultant as part of a global firm. I was a part of Pricewaterhouse, which of course became PwC, so that's how old I am. And then I literally fell into independent consulting in 2004 when I got let go, part of a RIF. And I called an old PwC client, asked if they needed any help, and I literally had my first project before I even had a laptop. So that was, I don't know, 17 years ago, 2004. Okay. And my daughter was 3 years old. Also that same year I got divorced. So, but going into independent consulting was the best thing that ever happened to me, right? Because I made more money, I had more control of my time, I lowered my tax rate. I thought everybody should be doing this, right? Because there's so many benefits, but of course it's not that easy.
Yes.
So I continued to grow my independent consulting practice. And then several years into it, I discovered that there was a segment of the market that was underserved, right? So corporate clients wanted to hire independent talent, didn't know how to find them, didn't know how to do that legally. Plus there was all of these compliance hurdles that were in place. So I got this idea of creating a company that would handle the compliance for independent consultants and represent them for Fortune 500 with Fortune 500 companies. And that's how my first company was born, which is called the Proco Agency. It's basically the creative artist agency for independent HR talent. So as a result of growing Proco into a multi-million-dollar business, I got the reputation as the person to call if you have questions about going independent, or if you are independent. How do you grow your business, or how do you do contracting questions? How do you figure out your niche? Do you need an LLC? You name it, I've probably heard the question. And I got tired of going out to lunch twice a week, giving people the same information. And I thought there's got to be a better way to serve more people. So I reached out to two fellow independent consultants and I said, hey, I've got this idea for this community and organization to help people launch and grow their own independent consulting businesses. And they said, hey, it's a great idea. We should do it. So that's why we created Pika.
Okay, let me ask you, I'm very good at one thing in life, which is I will admit when I don't know something. When you said you were an OD consultant, I don't know what an OD consultant is.
Yeah, sorry, that's an HR term.
Okay.
It's organizational development, or
okay.
Another way of thinking about it is like organizational effectiveness, where you are working to solve problems within a company.
Okay, that makes some sense. Now you talked about getting rift and life events, getting divorced and whatnot. When I used to be a screenwriter, I think we called this an inciting incident. Your characters are going along and then something happens and that's the story. Is that excuse me, is that a common thing, the inciting incident, or the alternative I feel like would be people make a plan and over time sort of gradually saying, I'm going to shift out of this corporate position I have into independent, setting up independently.
Let me scan my mental database for like the thousands of independent consultants I know. Yeah. I think it's more common to do a gradual transition. Although there are a lot of people that do get riffed or let go from their companies, right? Rift meaning reduction in force. And then they think, well, maybe now that I've got severance, maybe now's the time to do that thing that I've been thinking about for all these years. So Pika has a lot of members like that, right? They've been let go, they've got severance, so they've got, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of income for runway. to build and launch their consulting practice. But I wouldn't. But inciting events like the ones I had in 2004, no, that's not very common.
Okay, well, I do wonder if we're going to see more of that now, because you have people who maybe were working remotely, and if they have companies that say, all right, we're going to come back to the office, and maybe they're just not willing to, or they're saying, oh, let's try this other thing now, with the inciting incident, so to speak.
Yes.
Let me remind everybody here, if you have questions or comments or anything you'd like to suggest, the best way to do is just drop them in the comments. You're also welcome to say hello and where you all are. I recognize some names from others of these. And I'm not sure if I mentioned when you guys came in, this, but I'm recording this. So if you don't want to be on the screen, don't turn on your camera. Yeah, otherwise, so talk to me about, you guys have I've been kind of pushing for you this free webinar event that you're doing. Can you tell me a little bit about what that's going to be like? I want to make sure we get to that.
Yeah, so that's part of our sponsorship of Understandably, right? Is we're running a series of ads. And really what we found over the years is that a lot of people just have questions about whether or not this is the right path for me. So I run a free webinar, which is literally called, Is Independent Consulting the Right Path for Me? And the response rate as a result of running it Understandably has been fantastic. It's coming up, I think, on July 23rd, which I guess is next Friday, a week from now. Whenever this is airing, I don't know.
Yep.
But we also put recorded versions on our YouTube channel. And basically it's a chance for people to ask questions like, what about this and what about that? But really, I opened that webinar by saying, my mission is to try to talk you out of independent consulting, because it is hard, it is risky. You're gonna have to do things that you're not comfortable doing, like selling yourself. So if people make it through the end of the webinar and they're like, oh, well, okay, now I understand the pros and cons and the risks, but I still want to do it, then the next step is usually the 1-hour workshop that I lead that's $39 that says how to get started as an independent consultant. So really, I guess you could say that free webinar is sort of the gateway drug to Pika.
Got it. All right, so who are your members? What sort of industries, what sort of backgrounds, who's getting involved with this?
Yeah, I'm quite pleased that we are attracting the type of people that we wanted to attract. So we did a lot of research before we launched, and we set up marketing personas and all this other nonsense that they teach you in business school. And we are attracting those type of people. So by and large, I would say our members are over 40. They've got usually at least 20 years of experience in work experience. And they come from all different, I don't know if we have anybody from Alaska, but I'm going to say nearly all 50 states.
Okay.
And all different professions. We've got people that are independent consultants running clinical trials for biopharma companies. We've got people that do HR consulting, supply chain consulting, customer experience consulting. I got a guy that does medical practice advisory services. You name it, we may have somebody in the network that does that. Okay. So it's all different types. But the reason that I'm so pleased that people are in the second half of their careers is because one of the vital success factors for being successful as an independent consultant is having credibility, right? So if you're 5 years out of college, it's hard to get the credibility you need to get a client to invest or spend tens of thousands of dollars to hire you, right? So it's a good second career choice, not a first career choice.
Okay, it's interesting though, and I'll just ask the question on this, which is a lot of the high price consulting companies. My understanding has always been that that's their bread and butter, is hiring smart young people and sending them off to, I'd say legitimately smart, but maybe not experienced, maybe not expert yet. So I don't know, is that a differentiator, or how do you address that?
No. I think it's a yes and. I think my answer is a yes and. So yes, you are correct in that the large consulting firms do recruit out of undergraduate and graduate programs, right? But I was in one of those firms for 5 years. I was in a global firm. Fantastic experience. Loved it, loved my colleagues, loved the work, loved the clients. But once I had a baby, that model really wasn't sustainable for me. I
Sure.
felt like I couldn't be a great consultant and a great mom at the same time, because the demands of working for a global firm, it's a lifestyle choice, and I was done with that, which is why I stepped out of the large firm. We do have people going independent that have worked in the large firms, and they do have an easier time of it, because they've been trained to manage expectations, scope the work appropriately. They know how to like bring up risks and potential issues without seeming, afraid almost. They just have more confidence, I guess.
Okay.
So I think, did I answer your question in particular? So it's not a competitive thing. It's more of like an alternative, right? If you're not going to pursue your career through one of the big firms, independent consulting is a great option. But I would say most of our members come from industry, right? Like they've been 20 years at Franklin Templeton Investment or at Hewlett Packard or whatever, and now they want to step out and do something else.
Okay. Yeah, no, I find it interesting. I don't know, maybe it's just the world I'm in. Maybe it's from writing for Inc. and writing The Intelligent Entrepreneur and things like this. But I get a lot of, I don't mean to disparage, but it's kind of a funny name, but these hustle bro type of programs and things like that, where it is a lot of 22-year-olds that are thinking, how can I make $10 million by the time I'm really old, like 25? And, by then be moving on to my next thing. So it sounds like you're taking a very conscious approach that's not who's really your audience. Your audience is the people that have already done 15, 20 years and developed expertise.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Okay. So I find it funny you mentioned that part of you feel like your goal is to talk people out of becoming independent contractors. So what are the tools in your toolbox, or whatever the analogy is I'm trying to come up with? Why should I not become an independent contractor?
Okay, well, I'm pulling a few pages now from the free webinar.
Okay.
But I would say the number one reason that people don't take the leap to independent consulting is because of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? There's a lot of FUD when you want to try anything new, but let alone be self-employed. It just seems to be exponential amounts of FUD. But even if you've been independent for 5 years, FUD still creeps in from time to time. So I'd say the number one reason not to go independent is just dealing with the uncertainty. It's a little bit like doing flying trapeze, which incidentally I used to do as a teenager. And so it's a little bit like doing flying trapeze and not knowing if the catcher is going to be there, right? And a lot of people just can't deal with that risk. So I have a friend of mine, actually, she was with Accenture for many years. Then she came to work for me at Levi Strauss when I was internal there. And then that was the riff, right? They ran out of, they pulled the money, they pulled the plug on the funding for the program that we were working on. So the project team of 50 of us were let go. So that's when I fell into independent consulting in 2004. And my friend Benita went to work, I think, for Kaiser Permanente. Well, as I started making really great money being self-employed, I reached out to Benita and I said, hey, you should do this because, right, it's the best thing ever. You control your own hours, you make a ton of money, you don't have to deal with all the big firm BS. And so I kept, every time I got together with Benita for dinner or whatever, or for drinks, I'd say, hey, you really ought to think about independent consulting. And finally she said to me, she's like, Liz, I just know myself and I won't be able to deal with the risk of not knowing how I'm going to pay my mortgage. She said, it'll stress me out beyond all belief. I know I just can't do it. So I stopped trying to convince her. But I'd say that's probably the number one reason why people shouldn't go into it. It can be scary.
Yeah. Are most of the people you're dealing with in Peak, are they, I'm just thinking, how do you get your first client? It seems like the obvious thing, if you have 20 years of experience, is turning around and getting hired by the company you just left or by a client that you've worked with there in the past. Is that the route?
Yep. That's very common. Yes. But it's tricky to do that because it's risky for a corporation to hire a former employee because of the laws that we are facing now. I don't really want this to become a political discussion, but it's hard to be hired as an independent consultant or independent contractor status if you've worked for that company before. But it is one of the most common ways of getting your first client when you step into independent consulting. But we run a workshop called Business Development for Independent Consultants, And we tell people it's not as hard as you think it is. It's really about networking and building relationships over time, because nobody's going to spend tens of thousands of dollars to hire a consultant if they don't think that person's credible and has the expertise, and if they don't trust the person. And the only way to build trust is by having a conversation, building relationships over time. And so that's how you build your book of business, is by reaching out to people who know you and trust you. That's the first place to start.
Yeah. Okay. And then how about, second client, third client, fourth client? What's the, I mean, there's a phrase about working in your business versus working on your business. And it seems like this is probably the only way I can work is to be independent like this, but you basically do take on a second full-time job. So how do you teach people to manage that? How do you teach people to, that old saying about it's great being independent. You control your hours as long as you're willing to work all of your hours.
As long as you're willing to work 24 hours a day.
Right.
Yes. So there's definitely tools, apps, processes, habits, right, to help manage working in your business versus on your business. And what we mean by that is, right, when I'm independent, when I'm doing work for a client, I could do that 40, 50, 60 hours a week. That's working in my business, but I'm not building my own business. So I'm not working on my business. And so the rule of thumb is that you should be spending 20% of your time working on your business, not in it. So if you're consulting with a client, maybe you're giving them 4 days a week, and the 5th day a week is working on your business, right? Either on your marketing, or on your outreach, on building relationships, on meeting with clients, publishing a white paper, leading a webinar, or whatever, right? But 20% of your time is the rule of thumb.
And actually that leads me to a question here. It kind of ties a lot of things in. When you talk about going back to a previous employer, or previous client, setting aside non-competes, whatever, which might be an issue, but is the goal to be, let me think how to put this. What you've just described, doing 40% of 80% of your time for one client, seems like a lot of eggs in one basket. So is part of the goal to, no, I want 80, I want 80 clients each doing 1/80th of my business? Or is it, no, I'm a goal is to have this giant anchor client that's doing a lot, and then you maybe get things in elsewhere, or I don't know. I know we're talking about people in all types of different businesses, so there's probably all types of different answers, but just, you must get asked that question all the time.
Yes, and it depends on the type of consulting you do. And it depends on your preferences.
Yeah.
Like one of the best consultants I know, I'm not gonna name drop because I didn't get his permission to do so. But anyway, one of the best consultants I know consistently juggles at least 3 clients at a time, right? But it's the type of work he does is very strategic. He's very advisory, right? So he's not putting his hands on the computer and creating communication plans or work plans or project launch plans or PowerPoint decks or anything, right? He's purely advisory. On the other hand, the type of consulting I used to do was change management on big, hairy systems implementations, like you're implementing Oracle or SAP worldwide. I used to run those programs. So there is no way I could juggle more than one client because they're very time consuming. They're like freight trains when those huge projects are rolling.
I can imagine.
So I did, those were my anchor clients, right? But I still had a golden rule, one person in person once a week to keep my pipeline and my network warm. So I would invite a client to join me for lunch, even if we were walking down to Subway to pick up our sandwiches, or we'd meet for drinks afterwards. But one person in person once a week was enough to keep my network warm, so that when one of those big anchor clients projects was ending, I could easily reach back out to people and say, hey, I'm finally coming up for air, finished that 18-month project with Hewlett Packard.
Wow.
And let me know if you hear of anything, because I'd already been keeping the network warm and keeping that trust open, right? I was developing the relationships all along.
It's interesting. I want to, there's a question here from Lynn. It's a little bit specific, but I want to ask, and maybe we can take it just a little bit broader. She says she's an independent contractor working for a law firm, summarizing and translating medical information and slowly getting into social media copywriting. So she was asking if you had anyone with a similar background in your group, which might be a little specific, but maybe the answer is yes, I do. But also I was just thinking, without, If you can describe any more kind of the unusual types of businesses that you've seen or consultants that you've seen. I understand you maybe can't be super specific, but to some
So
degree.
I have two lines of thought with regard to this question. One is there's a certain guy that popped into my mind just now who is a member of PICA, and he used to be a subcontractor through law firms, and he recently, just this year, stepped out on his own, and he's very happy that he did. I'm not going to get into the reasons why, but basically he's making more money, and he's charging while he's charging his clients less, right? Because he's not that law firm markup isn't in the middle anymore. But on the other hand, he doesn't do social media or whatever the other item was that you had in the question. But I know other consultants that do that type of work. So I don't know anybody exactly with this unique combination, but yes. And I will say that the PICA membership base is small but mighty, right? Like I would love to say we've got 10,000 members. We don't even have 1,000 members. But the advantage of that now is that it's really a tight community. Like people are really helping each other and reaching out to each other. At the beginning of every workshop, not the free webinars because there's too many people, but at the beginning of every workshop that we do introductions, people introduce themselves, and then I share their LinkedIn profiles so that they can connect offline via LinkedIn. And so that's how we continue to build momentum.
Now, are you doing everything? Everybody's doing everything virtual right now, but in general, are you doing things virtually? And are there enough people in, I don't know, Los Angeles or whatever that you have some in-person meetings, or is that in the future?
We tried that when we first launched 3 years ago, doing in-person events. And it was a little bit like pushing a boulder uphill, because in the major metros where you would have a critical mass of interested people, it's so darn hard to get anywhere to go to an event, right? So in LA, Los Angeles, where would you host this? We tried Manhattan Beach, we tried downtown, we tried up in the valley, and it's just this traffic. It's not convenient to anybody. So even before the pandemic hit, we'd stopped doing in-person events because it was just too much work.
Yeah. Now, just a funny thing about LA, I lived there a while back and I worked downtown. I lived in West LA, and I had friends from work that would say, oh, we should get our families together on the weekend, and realize, no, well, they live in Pasadena. So it's who's going to drive the 2 hours? It's just not going to happen. Yeah. We could fly somewhere more easily in a way. Yeah. You're reminding me of just another, I don't know, Bill story, which is just that I worked, when I was in law school, I worked in the legal department of a major US corporation. And there was a colleague there who's not a lawyer, who decided to go out on his own and basically launch a business doing the specialized kind of computer related service. This is a while back, so he was more rare then. And I went to lunch with him maybe a year or two later, and he said it was the best thing because, you know, I couldn't have gone into my boss at this company and said, could I have a 250% raise, please? But he was able to bill 2.5 times what he had billed by, you know, being outside. So it kind of opened my eyes at that time.
He took the risk, but
he took the risk. Yeah,
he took the risk, and there's startup costs. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot, but or opportunity costs, right? Like if you spend the next 3 months trying to build your brand and your website and your messaging and your service offerings, you're not getting income any other way. It's an investment.
You mentioned a thing early on here about lower tax rates, and people, I mean, I think there's a lot of misinformation about what you can and can't do tax-wise in terms of being an independent consultant versus, you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. And I did not feed you that question in advance.
No.
But we've actually trademarked the phrase, friends don't let friends W-2. So what we mean by that is that there's 2 ways of being paid on a tax basis in America, right? There's the W-2 basis. When you're an employee, you get that W-2, W-4, and in January that says what your income was.
I think you give your employee the W-4 and they give you the W-2.
They give you the W-2.
If I remember right, yeah.
Well, the other way is on a 1099 basis. So as an independent contractor, you're paid on a 1099. Or if you're on a business-to-business basis, you're still getting a 1099, right? So the reason that we say friends don't let friends W-2 is when you're self-employed, and if you're making, I don't know what the exact breakpoint is, let's say $100,000, $120,000 a year or more, you are likely to lower your effective tax rate if you do two things. One is take standard business owner tax deductions, right? Like your home office space, your cell phone usage, your health insurance, things like that. And the other is if you contribute to your own retirement plan, like a SEP IRA or a solo 401k, those limits are way higher, like massively higher than if you were an employee. But every penny you put into your own retirement plan lowers your tax rate, your taxable income.
The taxable income anyway, right? Yeah.
Yes, right. So you can, the more you save for yourself, the less tax you're paying on your income. And that's the golden rule, right? So as long as you do those two things, you are likely to pay less in tax than if you were paid as an employee contributing to a 401k program. Now, the reason I know this is because several years ago when I was independent, I did my taxes two ways using TurboTax. One was my legitimate tax return with all my 1099 income from my clients. And then just for kicks, I'm like, what if I was paid, let's say through a staffing agency on a W-2 basis, and they had a 401k program? Turns out I paid or saved $8,000 in tax by being paid on a 1099 basis. $8,000.
Not bad, right? Health insurance, discuss. In the United States, I know we have some Canadian viewers that it's maybe not the same issue, but that's got to be an issue.
You're instinctively asking me all the questions I cover in the free webinar, Bill.
Oh, okay.
So that's another thing is benefits, right? Health insurance. There is no great answer. Obamacare and the health exchanges have made it easier to get health insurance when you're self-employed. So at least there's that, but it's still horribly expensive. There are ways to do it where you would, I don't want to get too detailed here, but there are ways that you could buy your own health insurance plan as long as it's HSA compatible, so a healthcare spending account compatible. Then you can also put money away into your HSA, which also lowers your effective tax rate. And then you can use that to pay your deductibles and your bills, or you can just let it accumulate and grow until retirement. So an HSA is another way to lower your effective tax rate and to save money for retirement. But the most important thing about health insurance is that's why consultants have to charge so much, right? So the biggest mistake people make when they step into independent consulting is they don't charge enough.
Oh, okay.
You have to cover your health insurance and your business insurance and your other business expenses. But the big one by far is your health insurance, right? So when clients sort of balk at why consultant rates are so expensive, the short answer is, hey, I have to pay my own business expenses and my own health insurance for my family.
It's funny. I know you don't want to get political in this, but I think maybe we should just talk a little bit about all the big discussions going on right now. California, where I understand you used to live, my state of New Jersey has floated these things around to basically make it a lot harder to classify someone as an independent contractor versus an employee, which it's great. It's bad enough prospectively, but it's kind of scary to think that you could be working for a client. I mean, it's my show. I'll be a little bit political. It's a little scary to think that you could be working for a client, but run the risk that state tax agencies are going to go after your client saying, no, you should have been paying employment taxes on this person who is very happy being an independent contractor and independent consultant. Would not in a million years want to go back to being an employee.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's no secret that the new law in California, AB 5, was a horrible disaster, right? Because it was designed to go after Uber and Lyft and TaskRabbit and people who were seemingly taking advantage of the system of paying people on an independent contractor basis. But the collateral damage was huge. As you know, journalists were impacted, translators, transcribers, actors, gig musicians, independent consultants, hairdressers. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of the collateral damage.
Yes.
But doesn't matter, it's law now, okay? So the problem is that a lot of states look to California when it comes to legislation, particularly the blue states, right? Which is why New Jersey has now a similar thing, or they did have a similar measure in your legislature. I don't know what's gone on with that. But more frightening now is the PRO Act, which is on the federal level. and it's already been passed by the House. It's now going up for vote in the Senate. There's something in the PRO Act called the ABC test. And the ABC test is what qualifies somebody as an employee or as an independent contractor. And it's overly restrictive. I'm not going to get into why, but it has to do with the item B. If you perform work that's in the same line of work as the hiring entity, right? So you as a journalist would be prohibited from writing articles for a magazine because their business is journalism, right? So the ABC test is horribly flawed. And at the moment, it's part of the PRO Act. The PRO Act is a pro-union bill. I'm not going to get into whether that's a good thing or not, but there's no need why the ABC test needs to be a part of it. So within the PICA community, we're urging people to write to or call their senators, and we have text available to do that, saying, you know, regardless of how you feel about the PRO Act, please don't pass it with the ABC test in it. That should be pulled out. So that's still up for vote in the Senate. And so while it wouldn't immediately impact us as independent contractors, because my understanding is it doesn't impact wage and order law, it's a slippery slope, and it soon will. You're a former lawyer, right? So it's a slippery slope. It's going to set a precedent, and then the other parts of the law are just going to end up following suit.
Yeah. Now, I understand you're a fairly new group, so but some of these things we talked about, like well, for example, lobbying, right? Or taking positions on things like this, or even, you know, trying to, if you get enough membership in different states, to try and band together and do health insurance offerings and that type of thing. Is that, you must have talked about that. I'm assuming you don't do it now.
Yeah, I would love to, right? It's
Right.
part of PICA's vision, particularly the health insurance. Would love to be able to offer group health insurance or something. And we were cautiously hopeful that during the Trump administration, that would be become a possibility, but it never came to fruition. And in terms of the lobbying, yeah, we just don't have the resources or the time. But for example, I'm a member of the National Federation of Independent Businesses, me as an individual, not PICA, because they do have the lobbying resources.
I see.
So, and I do some things, like I recently published an article on The Hill about sectoral bargaining and how it would impact independent contractors. But no, we don't have critical mass yet to move the needle, I don't think.
Got it. We had someone asking if you have Canadian members, but maybe just let me expand that. Is there any international component at all? Never mind just Canada, although Canada's amazing, right? We love Canada, but in general.
So the short answer is yes. We have a couple members from Canada.
Okay.
We have subscribers to our blog particularly several from Australia. I don't know how that happened, but the reason it's called Professional Independent Consultants of America is because in America, we have such a unique environment, like our health insurance, like trying to qualify as an independent contractor. Our rules and regulations are unique to America. So that's why that's part of our name.
I've only looked into this just out of curiosity as an amateur. I guess because I was following the New Jersey bill when it was in the legislature, but there are other countries don't have really this hard dichotomy between their version of a 1099 and their version of a W-2. There are different classifications. They don't have the same ramifications necessarily. I mean, France, good luck firing anybody no matter what, whether you think they're an independent contractor or not. But
exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting, just the array of different solutions and laws. Excellent. So, well, thank you very much. Well, so first off, thank you for being a sponsor. I appreciate that very much. And, anybody that's thinking about this, I love having sponsors. I especially love having a sponsor that's kind of read the newsletter and been involved for a while and kind of gets what we're trying to do. We're in the early days of doing this. So we're very, we work with people. We get the idea, hey, you'd be interesting to have on as a guest on Understandably Live. And let's talk a little bit about what you know and what you share. But it's one of the things that we're trying to do to make this sustainable. So so thank you very much for doing it, and thank you for being here today.
Well, my pleasure. And if anybody is watching this and is questions about whether or not being a sponsor of Understandably is a good idea, we have gotten so much return on our investment, because we're a small bootstrapped organization, right? So I always thought we didn't have money to advertise or sponsor anything, but you made it approachable for us, and we've been horribly bad word, tremendously pleased.
Tremendously. Let's go with tremendously.
Tremendously pleased with the results. And one of the reasons why we wanted to sponsor and be a part of the Understandably community, and I don't even think I said this to you before, but it's because I've been obviously reading the newsletter for however long you've been doing it, I think. But the reason that it's part of my daily habit in the morning to read your newsletter is because it's about being human. And it sort of provides a different perspective on life, right? It's not the bad news that we keep hearing in the headlines. It's not a natural disaster. It's just about how to be a better human, I think. And that sort of aligns with Pika's mission, right? We want people to live their best self, be their best self, live and create the career of their dreams. And that's why I thought it would be worth a try. And we'll definitely be advertising some more and continue to sponsor you.
All right. Well, hey, I really appreciate that. I'm probably blushing here hearing these nice things, but I can't think of a better way to end it. So thank you very much, Liz. Thank you, everyone who joined us today and who watches this later. I would encourage you to check out Pika if you're interested, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Phil.